This is our 2010 Chevy Suburban that we have here at Western Wyoming Community College, and this one's obviously a special one. We use this one in the alternative fuels program, as you can plainly read there on the side. This particular Suburban runs on natural gas, and to be specific, this Suburban is bi-fueled. So what that means is it can run on natural gas or it can run on gasoline. We have partnered with Cng Natural Gas to make this Suburban possible. They are one of the local employers and one of the companies here in our area that actually is extracting natural gas from the areas around Rock Springs, and so we thank them for their generosity in helping us make this happen. But anyway, this Suburban is pretty much like any other Suburban. It is a 3/4 ton. It's got a 6-liter V8 engine, but it, like I said, it runs on natural gas. This particular vehicle runs a system by Autogas America, which is a company based out of northern Utah that produces natural gas vehicle conversion kits. And so they sold us a kit and hooked us up with a company down in Salt Lake City called Aries Transportation Technologies, who actually did the conversion, and they did a fantastic job. And we're going to show you some of the things in here in the back, because this is where all the business happens. So back here in the back we have our CNG tank, and we still have the third row seats. They're folded down right now because we've been back here working. But this tank takes up most of the room back behind the third row, but not all the room. There's still room for some things. A lot of people, when they are learning about natural gas vehicles, they see how much room a tank will take up in the back of an SUV like this, or in the trunk of a car, and they say, oh, well, that's horrible. I can't give up that space. And I honestly think most people probably could. Most people probably could, especially if you consider the fact that you can drive this vehicle 200 miles and it only costs you, depending on where you live, for us, 15 bucks. So we drive this vehicle 200 miles, it costs us $15. On a round trip, we're spending 30 bucks for fuel. Obviously, with that kind of fuel savings, you can give up a little bit of space. You figure out a way to make it work. So normally back here, this tank is covered by a nice big cover so that it's protected, and also so that you can't just see it hanging out back here. But we've had it off because we've been working on it. On a natural gas vehicle, the tank is usually the most expensive part. But we're going to look at where this system goes and how the fuel flows from the tank up to the engine. Kind of a brief introduction on the way this system works. So back in here you can see we have a valve that is attached to the tank. You can see the little knob there that is on this valve. I'll push that plastic out of the way. So back here the fuel flows out of the tank through this line right here. There is a manual valve here that will shut the tank off, but also back here there's an electronic valve that is computer controlled that can switch the fuel off and on. On our tank valve we have a pressure relief device, so that in the event that the tank becomes overpressurized, there's this heavy or thicker line here that will actually take the gas that is venting from the tank and blow it to the outside of the vehicle. This plastic bag is here as a barrier to capture any vapors that may escape from any of the connections or fittings back here, and it will also vent those vapors to the outside. So we have that bag disconnected and pulled back so that we could get to our valves back here. So anyway, that line is going to disappear down underneath the vehicle, and we'll raise the vehicle up and see where it goes. So now down under the back corner of this vehicle, we've got several different lines here. At the top of this line that you can see right in the middle of the screen, that's coming in from our fill port, which is right next to the gasoline filler neck. That you can see the gasoline filler neck coming down there too. So the gas comes in through the fill port, it passes through this one-way check valve right here, and then travels up that line to where there's a T. And you can see where that T comes in. One of those lines goes up to the tank to fill the tank, and the other line comes down along here and is going to go up to the engine. That other line that you can see, the metal line that isn't covered with the plastic split loom, that's that vent line coming from the pressure relief device. So this is where the pressurized gas would come out if we had a situation where that pressure relief device had to open up due to high temperature or overpressurization. But anyway, this line here comes down and is going to flow or run all the way along the frame. So if you can see it right there, and it goes along the frame up along the side of the vehicle. There it is again. Okay, now out here you'll see a label that says manual CNG shutoff valve. That's a valve that is easily accessible so that the fuel can be shut off if need be. In an event where first responders, for example, if this vehicle was in a wreck, would need to shut the fuel off, they could do it. And that valve is located right there. So that high pressure line comes into the valve there. And that's just a quarter turn ball valve that allows the fuel to be very easily turned off. You know, you can just essentially do that and the fuel's shut off. But that line continues on up here along there where it disappears up into the engine compartment. So let's go and look what's in the engine compartment. So looking at the rest of the system now, under the engine compartment, we come down here to where we've got some key components. This right here is that high pressure line that was underneath the vehicle. It comes up into here, into the high pressure regulator. And what this does is it takes the 3600 psi that CNG is, well, that's the maximum level the CNG will be at when we fill it up. It takes that up to 3600 psi, and it is going to step it down to something much lower. Depending on the CNG system, it could be anywhere from 40 to 100 psi. And so that's what we have coming out of the pressure regulator here on this line. You'll also notice on the pressure regulator there is a gauge here that shows the current pressure, some electrical wires that go up to the controls that are that the driver has access to. The other thing we have is inside this housing here where the high pressure line comes in, there is a filter, a high pressure filter. And that's there to filter impurities out of the fuel, most specifically compressor oil. When you fill these things up at a filling station, there is a large compressor there that compresses the fuel to 3600 psi, and that fuel needs to be filtered of that compressor oil and anything else. So our low pressure line comes out, goes back here to where we have another filter, and that is the low pressure filter. Also back there behind the low pressure filter you can see there's a sensor that is for pressure and temperature, fuel rail pressure and temperature on the low side of the gas, or low pressure side of the fuel system. The line coming out of the filter going past that sensor tees off back here in the back, and it comes up to one of two fuel rails. So this right here, this is the fuel rail for the CNG injectors. Grab the light, and you can see there's one of the injectors right there. On the bottom of the injector there's a hose, and that hose is going to go down to a fitting that will allow the gas to just flow right into the intake port. So there's an injector for each cylinder. So this is a multi-port injected system, and it still retains the gasoline injectors. The gasoline injectors are down low, back in here deeper. It still has all of those things in order to function. Here's the fuel rail on this side. You might be able to see it a little bit better. With our natural gas injectors, there is a pressure sensor right there as well, kind of a map sensor for the CNG system. And that's mostly it. The only other thing that is under the hood over here is the computer. And this computer here is responsible for controlling the CNG system. It is responsible for essentially making the regular powertrain control module that runs the gasoline injectors think that the engine is running on gasoline. But it's not. So it kind of takes over. You could call it a piggyback system. We used to do this a long time ago in performance applications where, back in the days before we could program a computer, we would stack another computer on top of it, basically. We have a port here that is an OBD2 port, and through the OBD2 port we can look at some of the serial data for the CNG system, for the sensors, some of those kinds of readings, and any trouble codes that may result. So that's pretty much what we have underneath the hood of this vehicle. I think we'll look at one or two more things, but as you can see, it's pretty simple. There's not a lot that's required to make a vehicle run on natural gas. Looking behind the fuel door, this is just the regular fuel door. You can see we have our gas cap here where we put gasoline in it, but we also have this fitting in here where we put the natural gas. So on that fitting, we attach a high pressure receptacle that will actually click onto that, and it will dispense the natural gas through this port. You'll notice the sticker here says 3600 psi. This is a 3600 psi CNG system, so it will fill up from dispensers that are dispensing the fuel at 3600 psi. Now some dispensers run at 3000 psi. You can still fill this vehicle on a 3000 psi dispenser, but you're not going to get as much fuel in the tank. That's really why we have the fuel at such high pressure, is so that we can fit more of it in the tank and give us more range. So filling up at 3000 psi is okay on this vehicle. You're just not going to be able to drive it as far. Filling up a 3000 psi vehicle from a 3600 psi dispenser is not possible because the fill valve here will not accept the receptacle from the dispenser. Okay, kind of the last part of this CNG system to show you is this simple little control panel that's located up here in the on the dash, and you can see it's just a little simple box here. We've got a few different things going on. Number one, you can see that there's a light that's blinking with the G. What that is telling us is that the vehicle wants to switch from gasoline to natural gas. When you start up most bi-fueled vehicles, they start up on gasoline, and then once the engine is warmed up and everything is ready to go, it will switch over to natural gas. And so this thing is waiting to switch over to natural gas. We just started it. The engine temperature is warming up. It's almost at the point where it's probably about ready to switch over. The little red light here with the little icon that looks like a gas pump next to it, that's telling us that the vehicle is actually running on gasoline right now. These other lights over here, those are kind of your fuel gauge for your CNG tank. Now, we don't use a float to float on the level of the fuel in a CNG tank like we do on a gasoline tank, obviously, because it's not liquid fuel. It is a gas. So what we can go off of to determine the amount of fuel in the tank is pressure. So this is essentially showing us pressure. Now, out there on the regulator that we looked at a few minutes ago, we could see there was a gauge out there and then a couple of wires. They were sending a signal up to this little control panel. In the center of the controls, we have this little white button, and that's the button that you push to switch back and forth between gasoline and natural gas. Okay, and you can do that at any time while you're driving. If you want to switch between the two, you just push that button and it'll do so. The other thing you see, this little icon right here that looks like an engine, it actually looks a lot like a check engine light that many of you are probably familiar with. That is essentially what that is. That is a check engine light for the CNG system, a malfunction indicator lamp. If there is a problem with the CNG system, that little light will come on, and it will tell you that there's an issue and you need to go out there and hook up a scan tool where that data link connector was. So I'm gonna rev the engine up a little bit, because it requires the engine be revved up somewhat in order to get it to switch from gasoline to natural gas. You can hear the solenoids in the back click. And now we're on natural gas. So the red light shut off, the little green light that was blinking is now on solid, and so the engine is now running on natural gas. Okay, so it's as simple as that. If we want to run it, switch back to gasoline, we push the button, it beeps. It takes just a second for it to switch over. It's shutting off the CNG injectors and goes to gasoline injectors, and now it's on gasoline. Push it again, we go back, give it just a little bit of throttle, because it requires a little bit of throttle in order to switch from gasoline back to natural gas. There it goes. So how does it drive? Well, it drives very nicely. You can check out some of our other videos on YouTube. You can actually look at horsepower and acceleration. For this particular vehicle, it loses a little bit of power, which is going to make it a little slower on acceleration. But it's not enough that you can feel. You really can't feel it. If you're driving down the freeway and you're climbing a steep hill, it feels exactly the same on gasoline as it does on natural gas. So it runs very nicely. We've been really happy with it. We use it for lots of different things here at the college. The students in the alternative fuels program get to use it to practice working on natural gas vehicles. But all around it works very well. And considering the amount of fuel that you would use to run a Suburban with a 6-liter V8, when this thing's running on natural gas, it's so much cheaper. It is so much cheaper, and the fuel economy is the same. This thing gets about 17 or 18 miles per gallon on gasoline, just like it does on natural gas. So that really isn't any different. It's just that the CNG is much cheaper. So CNG is a fantastic fuel, and it's something that we believe in here at Western Wyoming Community College. We believe to be a very worthwhile endeavor for anybody that wants to convert their vehicles to natural gas. It is definitely something worth looking into.